pedagogical approaches to teaching children with learning disabilities in an inclusive setup. So to get started, I thought we would just start with one of my favorite quotes that come from the Brain Gym program, that movement-based learning calls for highly structured, intentional movement. And what makes this unique is that we're not looking at something like fidgeting with a pen, but rather bringing some intention to our movement and bringing that into our classrooms or wherever we're learning this year. I know here where I am in the Midwest of the United States, we have a lot of people that are switching over to fully distance learning. So they might be learning in their bedroom or at the kitchen table. And so if we can encourage our families to be thinking about how we can bring more movement into the learning environment, that will be really helpful. And this quote comes from Paul Dennison, who is the founder of the Brain Gym program. And so I put one of his books here on the top corner, the Brain Gym Teachers Edition. In our short time together, I thought we could just look at what does that mean of how can we do flexible learning positions to meet children of all different learning abilities. So if we look at the picture on the left, that to me is less than ideal, sitting at a desk in a traditional way. And we can even look at this young girl's posture of how slouched it is and think about where might she have tension in her body right now? Is she able to use both her ears? One of them's covered up with her arm. What about her eyes? Are both of them able to track, or is it probably just the eye on top and the other eye is not really available? So that sitting at a desk to take in information does not work for everyone. It does work for some. That's my preferred way of learning. I prefer to be sitting at a clean surface. Here in the middle photo, we see a hammock. Just imagine if you were cozied up in a hammock to do your learning and you had that warm fabric surrounding you, giving you some safe touch. And if you're someone that struggles with touch, maybe someone on the autism spectrum, you don't always like human touch. And so this is another way to get that cozy feeling, to get that feeling of safety so that you're more able to come up in your brain where you want to be doing your learning. And then the third learning position that I chose to put on here is a spooner board or any sort of balance board or wobble board. But that any sort of moving surface allows us to have constant movement in our body. So here I am speaking to you today and I'm standing. So I'm able to shift my weight to one hip and to the other and to move around. We want to do that for our children as well. And this child is showing you that we often think of these tools as things that we stand on. And she's showing you, wow, you could sit on it and still get that slight movement in your hips. I know for me, when I'm sitting here at my counter at my desk, I often put a balance board under my feet. So I may be sitting in a chair very traditionally, but I still have that balance board that's allowing slight movements. So I think when we're looking at pedagogical approaches, we want to really keep in mind our flexible learning positions, that they don't all have to be sit up straight, stop talking, look at me, listen, because we don't all learn in those traditional ways. Sometimes we need to turn off some of those senses, which we're going to come to shortly. Another thing when part of this title even is inclusivity. So when we're looking at the pedagogical approaches, we want to be figuring out how can we include versus exclude. And one way is to do things for the whole class. Everyone, I think, today can benefit from movement. And so let's bring the movement into the whole group instead of pulling one person out. What you see here are some fourth graders, and they're working on eye-hand coordination as a whole group. And so we can see that they're all going to benefit from eye tracking. They're all benefiting from eye-hand working together. They're all benefiting from lightness of touch. And they're also getting that social element of getting to work together. And this would even work on Zoom, that If you were a teacher and having to teach in a hybrid format or online right now, and everyone had the same activity out, everyone can be participating and still have that element of, here, look what I did. Wow, this one was really hard. So we want to consider, how can we be inclusive versus exclusive, bringing in whole class movement. And then sometimes it is important to offer individualized movement. We don't all benefit from the same thing. There we go. When I was thinking about this talk, I was thinking of, how do we determine what individualized movement to bring to someone? And to me, it comes down to three things: observe, tailor, and respect. And so the best way to start is through observation. And my background is in Montessori. Montessori is very much into observing the child. The Brain Gym program is very much into observing and noticing the child or ourselves. And so we want to be able to observe and then make an educated hypothesis. And that means we have to learn what movements might benefit different challenges. The second part of that is tailor, that we want to be able to tailor our movements that we bring to our students to best meet them. And so what we see here in this picture is, again, a fourth grader. And I had brought some balance boards into the classroom, and we need to recognize that not everyone's going to be comfortable stepping up onto a moving object right away. So some are going to want to take a little time just to tentatively get up on that balance board, and they're going to want to explore, how far will it tilt to each side? Where's the middle? How do I find stillness? That might be all you do for a day or a week. That different children take different lengths of time to become comfortable with moving. And then once they master that, we want to keep adding to it. We want to keep building into that growth mindset of, okay, here they are now, how can I get them to the next place? And one way that I was doing that with this child was using a push ball, so just a little rubber ball. And once he mastered being on the board, then we just played with going behind our back. And so we weren't ever letting go of the ball, we're just passing it. And we might pass it two different directions. And you could use a ball of yarn, a pair of socks, anything that you're passing, so that he's working on his midline. That here's my midline, can I cross it in the front? Can I cross it in the back? How is that going to support learning challenges? How is that going to support learning? And then finally, the next place that this young guy got to was releasing the object and doing a little toss. And so here's where the respect comes in, that before I ever invited him to toss it, I set the boundaries of what was an appropriate toss, that we weren't going to throw it at our neighbor's head. We weren't going to break our smartboard or destroy property. We were tossing to ourselves. So from one hand across the midline to the other hand, like a rainbow. And so that respect goes both ways, that I'm not going to push someone out of their comfort zone into a place of a stress response. I'm just going to nudge them into that place of a growth mindset. And that he in turn is going to respect me. So individualized movement, one example is with a balance board. There's many other examples of how you can work one-on-one with someone to support them, whether it's learning to do more eye-hand coordination, visual tracking, auditory processing, all those different skills. So as we just continue moving forward in that idea of different learning positions and ways to learn, I wanted to kind of look at the planes of learning. And so I found this photo I had of high schoolers, that what if we allowed kids to get out of their chairs and be in a vertical plane? And so a lot of you are probably sitting down listening to me. I am standing, so my focus is spot on. I am attending, I'm not falling over. I have a lot of participation going on. What about you? Would your participation level change if you stood up? And for a lot of us, it would, because once we're standing, now we have to work on our balance and make sure that we don't fall over. And it often makes us more engaged as well. So we might change the way that we are communicating. I think this photo is especially wonderful because they're not just standing around chit-chatting, but they're using their eye-hand coordination. They're using discussion. You can tell that one person is writing and showing something, and others are in a receptive mode. So you've got both the receptive and the expressive processes going on in this photo. So to me, inviting our classes to be vertical is really important. And again, as you're teaching online, no one says that computer has to be at the desk and you have to be sitting. What if they put it up on a cardboard box, which is what my computer's on right now, so that you're able to stand. And then on the right-hand side, horizontal. I'm not going to put a picture of sitting on here because we all have mastered how to sit. But what if we looked at tummy time? And what would that do for us? And so here we see a very young learner. I think she was a first grader then, and she was doing her map lesson, the countries of the world, on her tummy. And what does that tummy do for us? And so if you have studied developmental movement patterns, or if you have children, you know that those babies spend time on their tummies. And that's really important for them to have that opportunity to figure out, where's my center? How do I pull that center off the earth so that I'm ready to crawl? How do I use my shoulder girdle? How do I line up my hips so that I can move forward? And what does this do for my strength training? And so there's all these benefits of putting our kids back on their tummies. I would suggest giving choices, because just like some don't like sitting crisscross applesauce because it hurts their hips, some aren't going to like being on their tummy if they have any gut imbalance going on. A bloated tummy, that can be very uncomfortable to be told to be on the floor. So to offer opportunities and choices and freedom of movement often will increase focus and attention and ability to learn in a classroom. I'd be remiss in a conference about dyslexia if we didn't talk about the senses a little bit and just break them down into the primary senses. So we only have a few minutes, so we're just going to talk about two of them today. I wanted to just throw out to you the words auditory processing, and to consider that when we're looking at pedagogical approaches and looking at how to include, sometimes the easiest way to include is to invite kids to put on headphones. If someone is having a hard time paying attention, sometimes they just need some noise canceling headphones to get rid of some of that side noise so that they can look at their book and use their sense of vision. So we want to minimize one sense to make the other sense more accessible. We also can use headphones to bring in specific listening programs. And there's all sorts of research out there about certain sounds, certain music, certain input to each ear in isolation of the other ear can really help with the way that we process. I know two that I've studied are the listening program and the integrated listening systems, and there's many more out there. Just while we're looking at this photo, the other thing to consider is this flexible learning position that she chose. And so this young learner is sitting on a sofa with legs outstretched, books in front of her, headphones on, some back support. This would not be my ideal learning position. But if we can allow that freedom of choice, we often will get more accomplished. And the quote that I put on here is, sensory isolation leads to sensory integration. And this is my own belief based on my work with children and based on my work as a Montessori instructor for 3 to 6 year olds. That with those very young children, we often isolate the senses first. So we work on just the sense of vision. just grading from large to small or short to long or thin to thick. Or we work on matching colors. And then we might work on just the sense of hearing and matching different sound cylinders. We do a lot with the sense of touch and lightness of touch with different tactile boards. We even do things with the sense of taste and the sense of smell. And so in the beginning, we isolate those senses and then we start combining them and bringing them together. And that's where we find the sensory integration. So the other sense I wanted to take time to look at today is visual processing. And with this one, again, to be thinking of our sense of sight and how some of us are overstimulated and some of us are understimulated with what we see in our environment. So behind me, I have a very plain wall. That works for some. I also have my corner, which has a number of objects. So if I have a student come in here and if they're overwhelmed with a lot of things, I might just put that corner shelf down in a drawer so it's out of sight or over in the closet. A lot of us teachers, we like to have really colorful bulletin boards and lots of visual stimulation, which can be great for some, but it can be too much for others, that they might be so busy analyzing whether your lines are straight or are they slightly crooked that they're not able to hear what you're teaching. They're not able to use their sense of listening if their sense of sight is on overdrive. So as we think about that, I wanted to invite us, I know you've been on for a couple of hours already, so to invite us to do a quick activity. You might want to take off glasses if you have them on, put down your pen, and this is just to help relax the visual system. So all you're going to do is rub your hands together so they get nice and warm. And then you're going to gently put them over your eyes. And so your palms are on your cheeks, your fingertips are on your forehead, your eyes are closed, and breathe. As you're holding your hands over your eyes, just notice what's it like to relax your eyes right now and not be looking at the screen. How is that for you? Notice your breathing. Notice the muscle tension in your shoulders. So that's just a simple activity called palming that we can bring to our students and to our class at any time in any format, whether we're in person, in a hybrid format, online. This is a wonderful way to relax the visual system. And if I was going to be reading aloud to students, I might have them close their eyes and cover them up just as a way to really allow them to go inside and look for the story in their head. So as we continue, I am a brain gym instructor, an international faculty member. I get to travel all over the world and teach about the brain gym program. So I figured it would be rather important to at least cover a couple of brain gym movements with you and to give you some of those specific activities, because we started with that quote about movement-based learning calls for highly structured, intentional movement. And then I jumped right into learning positions. Well, what is an example of intentional movement? So I wanted to bring two to us today to close out our time together. So one of them is to get us active and wake up the system, and the other one is to kind of deactivate the system, to calm us down. And I put the word positive on there. So if we begin, if you're able to stand up, you might want to just stand up for a moment. And if you're sitting, I can cover how to do it that way as well. I have to tell you, it is early in the morning here in Minnesota, so I have not spoken this much at this early in the morning in forever, I think. All right, so we're going to begin by getting active. And if we're standing up, we're just going to lift one leg and take our other arm and bring them across so that they touch. And then we're going to switch. And if you're able, you can use your elbow or you can use your hand, whatever works for you. This activity is called the cross crawl in the Brain Gym program. And if we're analyzing it, why would this be a good intentional movement to bring into an environment? Well, if we think about it, I'm working on all these different planes that we've been talking about today. And so when I come across like this, I can feel my spine. So it's an axial movement. It's inviting that little bit of twist. I'm also on either side of my vertical midline. And so I'm crossing the midline. And then I'm coming forward and I'm going back to neutral. Forward and back to neutral. So we're working on all these different planes. And that's really great for just kind of activating the system, waking it up, and getting us ready to learn. We don't need to do this for a 30-minute physical education class period. This can be 30 seconds. It can be a short little micro intervention that we bring to our children. So again, if we're on a computer or if we're sitting in a class in a group of 23rd graders or 29th graders, it's okay to stop and do a 30-second let's get active opportunity. However, I could already hear most teachers are going to be saying, are you kidding? They're active enough. Have you ever heard of ADHD? I need them to calm down. And so it's really nice to pair these two together of let's wake everything up, let's find all our muscles, let's find our proprioception, and then let's calm it down with this other activity. And so for this other one, you can sit down or you can stand, either one. So I'm showing it standing there. We're just going to cross our ankles, and then we're going to put our hands out in front of us, thumbs down, cross, clap, down and up, that we tuck our hands right under our chin, and breathe. This activity is really good for calming the system down. We hear a lot about our sympathetic nervous system, like the gas pedal that gets us going. And a lot of us think, oh, the kids have mastered that these days. Well, what about the brake pedal? What about the parasympathetic nervous system? This can be really great for helping kids to find their brakes. So when you finish, when this feels like enough, you might take one big breath and be like, oh, that was good. Then you're just going to uncross your ankles and just tap your fingertips together or hold them gently.